Hello everyone, how's it going? And welcome to this little mini series that I'm going to be doing on the new runes for Wild Rift patch 4.3. A lot of people have been asking me to do a rundown and an in-depth look at all the new runes that have come out to Wild Rift, and to be honest, it was very difficult to fit it all into one video. So what I've done is I've split it all into 5 different episodes. In this episode, we'll be taking a look at Keystones, and then we'll take a look at all the minor rune tiers: Domination, Precision, Inspiration, and Resolve. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at the Keystones, and then every single day I'll be releasing another rune video with an in-depth look at all the new runes. Now, at the moment in Wild Rift, there is a lot of confusion with the community, and to be honest, it's not really helped a lot by Riot, because some of the rune descriptions and even some of the runes itself are actually very wrong, and some of the descriptions itself are also wrong. So what we did is we went into practice mode, we went into customs. Big massive shout out to my community as well, who helped me with some of the custom games to set it all up and to test all of these runes. I got for you all the best rune rundown that you will ever see. Again, this is only going to include Keystone, but keep an eye out over the next few days for my next rune guides that will be on all the different runes, all the other new runes that came out in patch 4.3. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Now, before we get into the new runes, let's take a look at how the rune system works now, because it is very, very different to how it was in previous patches, and it's been the same now for a long time. I think ever since the release, the rune system has been the exact same. So this has been a big change, and a lot of people are confused with how this rune system works. So you have 2 different layouts that you can use for this, rune page. You can either use this layout or you can use this layout, whatever one you prefer, but I will be skipping between the 2 just to kind of show you from both perspectives how the new rune system works. So basically, you still have the keystones at the top. These keystones are highlighted at the top. So you have ones like Electrocute, Airy, Phase Rush, and all the new ones, First Strike and Glacial Augment. You can still pick one keystone. This is exactly the same as what it was before. You got one keystone that you can pick there. Then underneath the keystones, this is where things change. So you have what's called primary runes and secondary runes. Now, for primary runes, you can pick out of 4 different tiers or 4 different leagues or whatever you want to call it. You have red ones, which are called Domination, yellow, which is called Precision, green, which is called Resolve, and blue, which is called Inspiration. You could pick one of these 4 tiers to then select runes from that tier. So say, for example, if I want to pick Precision, I can then pick 3 runes from this tier, but I can only pick 1 from each row. I can't pick Brutal and Triumph. I can't pick both these 2 runes. I have to pick 1 from each row. So if I pick one, I can't pick the other one. So this is where decisions are going to be very important. You can see this in the other layout as well. When you click on the little icon on the left hand side, you can pick either from Domination, Precision, Resolve, or Inspiration, and then you can only pick one of the top 3, one of the middle 3, and one of the second 3. So for someone like Lucian, for example, I'm going to go for Kraken Slayer, because I still think that rune is going to be really good. I'm going to go for Brutal to give me more auto attack damage, Coup de Grace to deal more damage to enemies that are low on health, and then Legend Bloodline to get a little bit more healing. Now, on the right hand side, you have what's called secondary rune. Now, the secondary rune has to be a different tier to the primary runes that you chose. So for the primary runes, I chose Precision, so I chose the yellow runes. So if I try and choose the yellow on the secondary runes on the right hand side, you can see the left hand side swaps, and the same again, if I choose Precision on the left hand side, the right side swaps. So you have to pick a different tier. It cannot be the same as the ones in your primary runes. So because I've picked Precision here, I have to pick either the red one, Domination, the green one, Resolve, or the blue one, Inspiration. Now, for the secondary runes, you can only pick one, but you can pick any one of the 9 runes. You have a lot of options in general. You have 3 different tiers, 9 runes for each one. So there's so many different options that you can go for Lucian. So for this case, I'm just going to go for something simple and go for something like bone plating. But that's pretty much it for how the rune system works. I think there's a lot more flexibility now with this rune system, a lot more cool ways that you can play the game, especially with the secondary rune. There's so many options. You can go for the secondary runes now, and even the primary runes, you can go for something like, Domination and go for a more aggressive approach, Resolve for the tanks, and also Inspiration. is going to be very, very important. So yeah, domination is mainly used for assassins and mainly mid laners, you know, mid lane mages. Mages and assassins work best with domination. Precision is more for bruisers and dual lane carries down in the bottom lane. Resolve is for tanks and also for supports, whether you're playing tanks in the bot lane or whether you're playing supports down in the bot lane. And inspiration is the flexible one. Inspiration is the one that doesn't really give any benefits to any sort of champion role in a way. It's just something to maybe give you a little bit of a boost, you know, things like item crafting, things like futures markets so you can buy items quicker, things like Nimbus cloaks. They don't actually give you an exact benefit to a certain role of a champion, but it gives you just an overall benefit that will help every champion. So you can pick which one you want and you can pick which layout you want to. Again, this exact same here. You pick which tree you want to go for, and then you pick one of the 9 runes from that tree. All right, first strike, the first keystone and the first new rune that we're going to be taking a look at in this video. This rune is kind of what it says in the name, first strike. You have to be the person that hits an enemy champion before they hit you. So this is used a lot on burst assassins that like to jump in and deal damage first, or long range champions like potentially Caitlyn and Jhin that have damage priority, that have the longer range and that can deal damage before the enemy champions deal you. Now, the description of the rune is kind of straightforward, but there is a little bit of an issue and a little bit of a problem where actually the description is kind of wrong. So 0.25 seconds after engaging an enemy in combat, dealing damage to them grants you 5 gold and a first strike effect that lasts 3 seconds. So pretty self-explanatory. You just have to engage on an enemy champion before they engage onto you, and you get to get 5 gold. Nice and easy. You have that first strike passive, which you're going to be getting, which will last 3 seconds. That allows you to deal 9% bonus true damage over 3 seconds to enemy champions, and once the effect is ended, you gain gold according to the bonus damage dealt. So the more damage that you deal within that 3 seconds, the more gold you're going to be getting. So it's not normally the first instance of damage that is giving you a lot of gold, because that first instance of damage is just giving you the 5 gold. It's actually the instances of damage afterwards which is going to give you that bonus true damage and a big massive influx of gold. Now you got 100% of the gold as a melee champion and 85% sorry of the gold as a ranged champion during this effect. Now in the description it does say that it is on a 20-second cooldown, but if we take a look at another description, this is from Chose. Big shout out to Chose. If you don't know who he is, he's another YouTube content creator for Wild Rift who always does the Chinese version of Wild Rift, always does the PBE and all the new leaks and all the new content, so make sure you go and check him out. If we take a look at his description, you can see in his description he actually says that first strike has a 20 to 13 second cooldown based on level. Now I thought I'd test this out because this is the whole point of this video, is testing out, you know, the way these runes work, if there's any problems with the runes or anything different with the runes, because there is a lot of description problems. And I actually figured out that Chose is actually correct, that this rune actually goes from 20 seconds down to 13 seconds based on level. So at level 1 is 20-second cooldown, at level 15 it goes down to a 13-second cooldown, which I'll show you a little bit on in the gameplay. But yeah, that's everything for this rune in terms of explaining. We're going to go into gameplay now. I'm going to show you a few little tips about this rune and how it works. All right, taking a look at first strike as a rune in game, you could tell you have first strike up and available to use and to try and get a little bit of extra gold when that blue orb on the left hand side of your champion is orbiting around you. If you don't have first strike active, then you won't have this orb around you. So make sure when you use first strike that you keep an eye on this orb. When it's up, try and look to walk up, use your abilities, use your auto attacks to try and get a little bit of extra gold. So once you use an ability, you can use Morgana's first ability or any auto attack or ability to proc first strike. I use the ability and you can hear that little bit of a sound trigger. That sound trigger basically means that you get that little bit of extra gold. Now you get 5 gold at the start from obviously engaging and being the first champion to actually deal damage, and then that little bit of damage afterwards with that 3 seconds will give you more gold and more true damage. So you can combo, you know, you can use simple combos like Morgana's first ability into her second ability, and you can hear there's multiple ticks or multiple of the sounds happening at the same time. Now this means that First Strike does work with damage over time abilities like Morgana's second ability, and also Morgana can also proc First Strike on multiple champions, and this can work on other champions as well, but you can proc it on multiple champions at the same time. So if I use First Strike on both of these target dummies at the same time, you can see the orb is actually going to both target dummies, so both the one on the left and the one on the right. So if you have a situation where you can try and get multiple enemy champions at once, say like Lux's third ability, for example, or Morgana's pull with her second ability, you can actually proc First Strike multiple times and deal a lot of damage and also collect a lot of gold. Now I mentioned something about the cooldown being wrong for First Strike. As you can see here with Morgana, I am level 15, so I'm going to wait until 610 and then I'm going to use my first ability to actually use First Strike. Now you can see that First Strike doesn't go on cooldown until the 3 seconds are up. That means that we're going to get First Strike back up again at 6 minutes and 26 seconds. So you go 23, 24, 25, 26. Boom, we have it back up again. So this means that First Strike actually has a 13-second cooldown at level 15. If I reset my level, if I go to level 1, sorry, and if I use my first ability again, we'll do it at 40. This is now going to go into, I believe it should be 7 minutes and 3 seconds, because that 3 seconds, again, First Strike doesn't go on cooldown until that 3-second window after you proc the First Strike passive comes up. So this is pretty big for assassins and also ranged champions in the late stages of the game, because you can proc it more often. As you can see here, the time is going up, and there you go, 7 minutes and 3 seconds, which means First Strike actually has a 20-second cooldown at level 1 and then has a 13-second cooldown at level 15. So it's completely based on level. Now there was something I was mentioning very briefly as well about being the first champion to use First Strike. Now this is actually very important, because as you'll see here, I'll try and do this as quick as possible with this target, with this little bit of a bot that I have. But if you actually get dealt damage first, say for example you're against a Caitlyn in lane, or you're against the Caitlyn just in general, and that Caitlyn auto attacks you first, then that Caitlyn is actually going to stop First Strike. So say for example this Garen, I could actually change the champion completely if I really want to. Maybe I should just like reset my level, and then maybe there you go. So there you go. See, I take damage there. As soon as I take damage from that Garen, my First Strike orb is lost. It's completely lost. That means that I can't actually proc First Strike anymore, which is very challenging, but also, you know, kind of the point of the actual skill itself. So again, I have First Strike up and available. I'm going to level up this Caitlyn very quickly. Well, Caitlyn already auto attacked me with her first ability, or hit me with her first ability. So there you go. That's another reason there. So all it is, so if I try and walk up and try and deal damage to this Caitlyn, you can see she used her net on me and my First Strike is gone. The orb is gone. So it's really important for First Strike to actually make sure that you're the one that deals damage first. If you're the one that deals damage first, then you're going to be the one that procs First Strike, deals the extra true damage, and gets that little bit of extra gold. On to the second new keystone now. We're going to be taking a look at Glacial Augment. Now, Glacial Augment is a rune for all you tank supports out there that want to help your team out a little bit more than yourself. This is a bit of a different alternative to Aftershock, whereas Aftershock, you gain more stats towards yourself, whether it's tankiness or damage, but Glacial Augment is a rune that actually helps out your team, because you get to slow down enemy champions, you get to allow them to deal less damage. That means enemy champions won't be dealing as much damage to your team as maybe they would think they would, and it just helps you a lot with the AoE slows that you get from the raise. Take a look at the description. Land an attack on an enemy champion, reduces their movement speed by 20% for 1.5 seconds. So not only can you slow enemies with the raise when you immobilize a champion, but you can also slow them when you're auto attacking, which makes it easier to land other abilities. This effect only affects each champion up to a maximum of 1 time within 10 seconds. Then you have a second effect, which is immobilizing an enemy champion, triggers 3 glacial rays that radiate towards you, creating a frozen region that lasts for 3 seconds. Now, champions that are in that frozen region, their movement speeds will be reduced, and also the damage that they deal is also reduced. You can see the percentages on screen if you want to read it. And even upon leaving the region, so upon leaving them rays of slows, their movement speed will still be reduced for the next 1.5 seconds, with the cooldown being 20 seconds. As I mentioned, this is really, really good for engaged supports that have a lot of crowd control, champions like Nautilus, Thresh, or even Ornn support. But actually, there's one champion that actually does well, really, really well with this rune is Janna. Janna's Tornado and Janna's Ultimate are two great ways to proc Glacial Augment, so that's another champion that you can give a try. Now, you're probably wondering, what is an immobilize effect? How do you immobilize an enemy champion? I'm going to show you a description on screen. This is going to tell you what immobilizing effects will work with Glacial Augment. So immobilizing effects refer to crowd control effects that render the unit unable to control their movement, which includes champions that are airborne, so things like Alistar, force action, so things like Berserk, Charm, Flee, or Torn, so this could be champions like Rammus Torn, Ari Charm, etc. Roots, sleeps, so Lilia Ultimate, stasis, stuns, and suppressions. Things that don't count are things like slows and also things like silences. You know, slows and silences will not count towards immobilizing effects. Everything that you see on screen is an immobilizing effect that will trigger the glacial rays for Glacial Augment. Now, for Glacial Augment, there is no indicator when Glacial Augment is up. Unlike First Strike, First Strike has that little bit of an orb that orbits around you, but for Glacial Augment, there's no indicator. So the way to tell if Glacial Augment is up and available is just to keep an eye on the cooldown at the bottom of the screen. If you don't see the cooldown on the bottom of the screen, the little Glacial Augment icon, you know Glacial Augment is up and available. Now let's see how the auto attacks work. So with the auto attacks with Glacial Augment, you can actually proc this on multiple champions very, very quickly. So say if I auto attack these two target dummies, you can see that they're both going to be slowed with the Glacial Augment's auto attacks. Whether it's ranged or melee attacks, they both slow for the exact same amount. There's no scaling or anything like that with ranged and melee champions. So one of the great champions that works really well for Glacial Augment is going to be Thresh, and that's also because it works with Thresh's third ability and also first ability, because the third ability actually knocks champions airborne. So if I use Thresh's third ability, you can see that the rays will come up, and you can see there the rays will come up, and the rays will always be in 3 different directions. So it'll be one that goes towards you, one that goes to the right, and one that goes to the left. And if you could do it very, very well, you can actually do it where you can slow multiple target dummies or multiple champions at the same time, and they will both be affected by the same glacial rays rune, which means that they're both going to be slowed and they're both going to take damage reduction. Another good one is Thresh's hook as well. You can use the play here. You can see, so I've actually procced glacial rays on both the target dummies at the same time. So that's very, very important to know. But as I mentioned, there's plenty of different ways that you can proc glacial rays. The Glacial Augment for the passive. One thing to note is that if you try and flay 2 people at the same time, or if you try and proc Glacial Rays, the passive for Glacial Augment, on multiple enemy champions, it won't work. It will always happen on that first instance of damage. So even though the target dummy, I was closest to the one that was closest to me here, depending on the direction that I actually use the flay, depends on what champion will be affected by the Glacial Augment passive. So say for example, if I was used to use the flay the other way, you can see that the glacial rays actually procs on the left dummy, not the right dummy. So that's one thing to note. If you do proc glacial rays from Glacial Augment on multiple enemy champions, it's always going to be that first instance of damage. But if you don't have a first instance of damage, say for example Lily's ultimate, for Lily's ultimate you can sleep multiple people at the same time, it will always be the closest champion towards you. That's everything for the new keystones that got added in Wild Rift patch 4.3. If you want to check out the other new runes, be sure to check out my playlist. Link will be down in the description, and I'll see you all in the next Wild Rift video. Peace.